Hello, good morning. In this video, we will discuss about Mockito expecting the calls. Mockito provides us a way to find the number of times a specific method is called. In our many scenarios, we may require that any specific method is called for any specific number of times, or we may also need to check whether this particular method has been never called on it or not. So to implement this behavior, Mockito has given us a facility to perform this task. So for this, I'll take one simple example to demonstrate. Now I'll create one small interface in order to write some methods, interface methods. So I call it as calculations, right? I call it as calculations. And inside this, I'll write some methods called, say, public int calculate square area int side. I will also write one more method, calculate rectangle area int length int breadth, right? So we have a square area and we have a rectangle area, and we will create one more class so that a calculate area impls, calculate area impls. So in this I am defining one object of calculations. Okay, I am defining one object of calculations. Right. So I'll write one setter method for this one. Yeah. So we have defined this, and I will try to implement the methods. Okay. So public int calculate square area int side. So return calcs dot calculate square area of side. In the same way, I am implementing one more method. Okay. So now I have implemented two methods for this calculate, right? So I have called this calculate area of a by passing the side, and calculate rectangle by passing the length and breadth. So now we will try to implement this or test this case. So I'll write one test calculate areas. So test calculate areas, and in this I will try to create mocks and inject mocks. Okay, I'll create one mock object. So this mock object is our calculations object. So this is our calculations object. Right. For this, I will create. Right, I'll create one object and we'll try to import the mock. And in order to implement this, we need this calculate implements class object, right? So calculate implements object should also be created. So in order to do that, I am injecting these marks, right? I'm injecting that marks, right? So try to import this one also. Okay, so now next thing is we have to write one test. Say public void, I am writing one test method. So inside this, the first step is I am importing this. Inside this, the first step is add the behavior, right? Add the behavior or mock the behavior. See, we have two methods defined in it. What is calculate area for a square and calculate area for a rectangle, but that behavior is not yet defined. So we need to first define those behaviors. So in order to write this, Mockito has given us say when and then. So we'll try to make use of these behaviors. Say when cal impls dot calculate square of 10. So if I pass 10, then return 100, right? Return 100, and we'll try to import that, right? We'll try to import that statics, right? Static statements. So when you call this method, return this one. In the same way, we will add another behavior, right? Calculate rectangle area of say 10 comma 5, right? 10 comma 5, then return then return 50. So now I have calculated. So next step is what we need to do is we need to verify it, right? So we need to verify the methods by calling the assertions. So we'll use this assertions, right? Assert dot assert assert dot assert equals of say our method is like say cals impls dot cal impls dot calculate rectangle of 10 comma 5. So it is compared with, right? It is compared with say something like 50, right? So we are comparing it with 50 here. So now when we try to run this method, right? So this test case, so in order to run this one, we need to add one run with. Yeah. So now my test case is passed. So that means when you call this method calculate area, it is. So now what I want is I want to verify whether this method is called for certain n number of times. Right. Now if you observe here in this case, I have called this method for 3 times. So I want to ensure whether this method is called only for a certain number of times. So I want to ensure only 2 times this method need to be called. So in those type of scenarios, Mockito has given us a mocking behavior called as verify, right? So we can use that by using times, right? By using the times parameter in the verify. So what we will do is, I will call that verify method, right? Verify. So what is our interface? Our interface is the cal calculations, right? So I'm writing calculations, right? Verify calculations, comma, times of 2, right? Times of 2 dot calculate rectangle of, right? Calculate rectangle of 10 comma 5, right? Calculate rectangle of 10 comma 5. So that means by this statement I am specifying to the Mockito and the JUnit test case or the JUnit framework that, see, this method calculate rectangle area method should be called only 2 times. See, if anybody tries to call more number of times, then make the test case has failed. So in this case, suppose if there is no such statement here, when I run this, my test case is passed. So I am not specifying any number of times that I want to call. But now when I write this method and again when I run the same method, see, we are getting the failure. Now you can clearly see it is wanted 2 times, but it was called for 3 times, meaning I am specifying this method need to be called only for the 2 times. But here I have called 3 times. So that's why this test is failed. Suppose I make this as a comment. So now there are only 2 assertion calls. That means my method is called only 2 times. Now, if you run this method, this is now passed because we are specifying this method to be called only 2 times. Here also we have called this method for 2 times only. Say, that is how you can specify the number of times. And by default, when I don't specify anything, the default is 1 time, right? So the default is 1 time here. Now, here in this case, I don't specify the number of times, right? I don't specify the number of times. See here, I am just passing this one and I will make this one. So now the default expectation is 1 time. But now here you have called 2 times. So that's why it is also failed. Now when I say this again, when I comment one more line, and now when you run this one, so the test is again passed. So because you are specifying the default times, so the default time is only 1 time. So that's why you can able to pass this test. And also we can ensure that any test can never be called, right? The test can never be called also. See, in this example, there are two methods are there. One is calculate rectangle area and second one is calculate square area. So in our example, at calculate a square is never called. So that is also we can ensure. Say, we can ensure whether this method is not at all called, right? Now I will say here calculations, right? Say calculations, comma, never, right? Calculations, comma, never. And what is the method which I never want to call? This calculate square area, right? Calculate square area is never called. Now, if you run this again, this test is also passed because in this example, my calculate square area is never called. For example, if I call that method once, let us say I'll call that method once. See, instead of calculate rectangle, what I will do here, I will say calculate square, right? Calculate square here. So in this example, say I am calling, right? I am calling this method, right? Say this method calculate square area. Now when I run this method, again my test case is false, because in this verify method I am specifying this method should be never called, but we have called this method one time. So you have to comment this. So when I comment this and again when I run this method, it is passed. So in this way we can clearly specify any number of times whether the given method is to be called or whether the method should not be called at all by using this Mockito verifying behavior. Yeah, that's all for this video. We will meet in the another video.